Hi, and welcome to the New South Wales Community of Policy Professionals 2022 webinar series. My name is Louisa Mamuni. As host of our webinar today, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting. I'm on Gadigal Wongal land, and wherever you may be joining us from, I recognise this land as Aboriginal land and pay respects to elders past, present and future, and welcome Aboriginal people with us today. In today's webinar, we are focusing on using behavioural insights to improve public policy. Now, policy is all about government decision making and how government decisions can be used to influence broader outcomes in our industries and our workplaces, in our communities, and even in our homes and who we are as people. What we eat, what we are allowed to do, and even what we spend time on are all topics government policy touches on. However, policy effectiveness could be increased by understanding behaviour is central to our consideration of policy and how it can be achieved. This involves an interdisciplinary approach to public policy. The New South Wales Behavioural Insights Unit uses the latest research about how people really think and act to help New South Wales government agencies deliver better services to citizens, combining evidence from behavioural insights and behavioural economics with the experience of service agencies and customers to identify and evaluate what works when and why to change behaviour. Our speakers are Dave, Ash, Fred and Gareth. Dave is the Director of the New South Wales Behavioural Insights Unit. In a diverse career, he's worked in consultancy, frontline community service, academia and government across several Australian jurisdictions and the UK. He brings a focus on demonstrating impact, supporting frontline delivery and empowering public service partners. Dave holds a PhD from the University of Sydney and is Fellow of the Royal Society for Public Health. Ash is a Senior Behavioural Advisor and has a PhD in Behavioural Neuroscience and a Bachelor of Psychology. She is currently working with 6 teams across government on challenges spanning from mental health in the workplace to biodiversity conservation on private land. Fred is a Senior Behavioural Advisor and has a Bachelor of Psychological Science and a Bachelor of Law and Finance. He has worked on a range of sludge busting projects and is currently working with digital licensing team to reduce sludge in licence application processes from across government. And Gareth is an Assistant Behavioural Advisor, has a Master of Organisational Psychology. He's currently working on increasing the number of women in non-traditional male-dominated trades. So thank you for joining us today. And I'll pass over to you for the presentation and then I'll come back on again for the discussion with our audience. So over to you.
Thanks, Louisa, and it's so exciting to be here in this prac, which really has such a excellent reputation across the New South Wales government for really generating capability development, support, and innovative thinking. So it's great for us to be here. I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land which where I am, which is the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, and also pay respects to elders past and present, and welcome to everyone as well who's here today. We're really excited about being here. We're going to go through a little bit of what is behavioural insights and how does it help you as a policy professional in the New South Wales government. We're going to talk also about how you can use behavioural insights to improve customer experience, cut effort to access the services that you all support and provide to sludge bust. And we're also going to talk through how you can use and access practical supports, tips and guidance to apply behavioural insights in your own work as an individual, but also how you can connect your teams, your branches, your divisions can connect with us in the New South Wales government and the Behavioural Insights Unit so we can support the delivery of the services that you're all working on. And I think we're trying to share the screen. It's causing us a little bit of trouble, but we'll get that going. That's all right. We'll see a few different faces from the Behavioural Insights Unit. We'll talk a little bit about a few things, and then there's ample opportunity for questions. The first thing I wanted to do was just tell you a little bit about our mission, who we are, and what we're trying to achieve. We're a small unit based in the Department of customer service. We work across the New South Wales government, and we are comprised of a range of people with different expertise in behavioural science, behavioural economics, qualitative and quantitative research, and data analysis and evaluation. We've been around for about 10 years. As I said, we're based in the Department of Customer Service, but we work across government. So we can work with all the different teams that are represented here, but also we've got a mission to support capability development across the New South Wales government. There's probably 4 key streams to our work. Those 4 streams, the first one is our rapid advisory work, where we provide rapid behavioural advice based on existing behavioural evidence to decision makers. So we did a lot of this during COVID, where we provided support to the government's COVID response, using often existing advice, but also sometimes generating new evidence. The other bucket of work that we have is we support the development of behaviourally informed interventions to meet particularly premiers or minister priorities. So that's the trial interventions, and we have a methodology that does that. We've had a lot of really great success stories, which you can see on our website, but just in that slide, an example of supporting fewer non-attendees at domestic violence defendants at court, an intervention that we did. The third bucket or stream of work that we do is around improving customer experience through busting sludge. We're going to talk a bit more about that later in this session. And the fourth and final one is we're really committed to growing New South Wales public sector confidence and capability in applying behavioural science, and we call that Behaviour Smart, because we're all about making and helping the New South Wales government be more behaviour smart. So that's about what we do. But today really is about what you and your agency and your role can do in terms of applying behavioural science to support the delivery of better outcomes for New South Wales citizens. And I'm going to hand over to Ash Morse to talk through a little bit about what behavioural insights is and how that can help you in your policy roles. Ash, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Well, Dave and Louisa have just given you a great introduction to the BIU, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time right now just making sure we're all on the same page about what exactly is behavioural insights. So I expect a lot of you here today have probably heard of behavioural insights. I'm sure that you've heard of some of these books or even read them, heard of these authors. But what these books don't always tell you is that behavioural insights is just one of a suite of tools that are all united by trying to understand human behaviour, thinking about human behaviour first, and trying to work with the ways that humans naturally think and behave and not against them. So this is about, as Louisa said, getting better odds of making an impact with policy, but it's also about getting really good outcomes for the people who are on the other end of that policy. So what we refer to in DCS as the customer. So what does it really mean to work with and not against human behavior? So you might have seen one of these before. This is called a desire path. And the way that these form is that a human comes along, sees this nicely set path and says, I actually don't want to take that route. I want to find my own way through. And what happens with desire paths is that they become self-reinforcing over time. So other people come along, they see a little trodden path through the grass, and actually they follow that person through, and eventually it looks something like this. So desire paths are actually a really common metaphor that are used to explain what behavioural insights is and why we think about behaviour first. So in this image here, you can see desire paths are a really good example of humans circumventing good design. So a path has been designed to help humans navigate their environment, and yet we find our own pathway anyway. And in behavioural insights, we think that this can actually be a really positive thing. So what we want to do is try and understand human behaviour, and we want to let people tell us how they want to naturally behave, and then we want to make it easier for them to do that. So what you can see in the image on the right is up top, the older image. That's actually a picture of desire paths that were created on a university campus. So they let these form over time. And then in the image on the bottom, you can see that what they did is actually paved those paths. So what they did is they let people express their natural desires for how they wanted to navigate the campus. They gathered evidence on how people wanted to do that, and then they made it easier for those people to navigate in the ways that they want to do that. So what does this look like for more complicated behavioural problems? So what you can see here is, I'm going to show you an example of how we can use behavioural insights to curb what you probably know is a pretty big problem in New South Wales, which is littering of cigarette butts. So what you can see here is a few examples of traditional approaches to enforcing, stopping cigarette littering. So you can see an example of social shaming. So the Hey Tosser campaign saying, it's a really bad look to litter your cigarette butts. You can see using other people in our society to report people who litter their cigarette butts. And then what you can see in the image on the right is a really traditional economic disincentive to littering cigarette butts, which is just a fine or a penalty. So despite all of these approaches, cigarette butts are still one of the most littered items in New South Wales. So these do change behaviour, but they don't get us all the way to really stopping that. And what this is quite a creative and BI'd approach to enticing people. Instead of regulating and enforcing them, we want to entice them to dispose of their cigarette butts responsibly. So what behavioural insights is designed to do is to give us a more realistic understanding of customer behaviour. So there are three key principles here, which is that humans have limited capacity in our minds. We can't pay attention to everything at once, and we can't hold all information in our head all at once. We have problems with self-regulation and sort of pushing through lots of small barriers that we might encounter in government services. And every decision that we make isn't made in a vacuum. It's always dependent on the context that we're in. So it could be the way you're framing information to people. It could be what others around us are doing, or what I showed you in that desire path metaphor is literally the way the physical environment is structured. This is not to say that the traditional tools of policy making don't work. In fact, we know that they do work. They work really well. It's just that you can add BI to your policy making toolbox to help you get the most that you can out of these traditional policy approaches. So by adding BI, thinking behavior first and getting that really realistic understanding of how humans naturally behave, you can increase the odds that you will change your customers' behavior in the way that you want. And you can actually also increase the odds that the customer will feel really good about it at the end of it as well. So here's another example of the way the BIU has used BI to increase actually compliance with a traditional policy approach of enforcement. So what you can see here is what the old speeding fine used to look like. So Revenue New South Wales would send this out to people and notice that lots of people pay late or don't pay at all. So what BIU is did some research with these customers and just asked them, what did you think when you opened this letter? And actually we found that one of the most common questions that people asked the Revenue Helpline was, what is an enforcement order? So actually it wasn't that they were understanding it and choosing not to pay, it's that actually they weren't understanding the information that they were being given in the first place. So we BI'd the speeding fine, and now it looks something like this. So what it actually says up front is really clearly, you've received an unpaid fine, explaining very, very clearly what this is and what to do with it. And that small change to an existing communication actually led to 3.1% more fines being paid on time, which might sound like a really small difference in behaviour, but actually across the state, this leads to an extra $10 million of fines being paid by their due date. And this actually gets a good outcome for the customer as well, because the consequence of not paying these fines is having your car and your license deregistered. So fewer customers had their cars and licenses deregistered because they knew what to do with the information that was being sent to them. So the other important part of understanding BI is that testing and iterating communications, policies, systems is really, really crucial. And that's because humans often behave in ways that we don't expect, but also changes that we make and interventions that we implement can have unintended effects. So another project that BIU worked on was trying to increase school attendance. And when we did research with parents, we found that many parents couldn't easily recall how many days their child had actually missed from school. We found that schools only communicated about absences very infrequently, and actually more than half of parents couldn't recall being notified about their child's last absence. So it seemed really obvious and really common sense that parents just needed more information about how many times their child had been absent from school to increase that child's attendance. So what we did is we tested out some letters that informed parents of how many days of school their child had missed. But actually, when we tested these out with parents, we found that even though we tried to strike a positive tone and empower parents with more information, these letters actually really scared parents, and they really scared vulnerable parents most of all. So it was really important for us to test these out before rolling out this intervention, because we found that actually it was having a negative impact on parents, which is not what we wanted. So instead, we did an intervention providing parents with supportive SMSs about how to engage with their child's learning, because evidence showed that engagement with learning would lead to greater school attendance. And again, this reinforces the importance of testing, because actually we found no overall change in this trial of trying to increase parent engagement with their child's learning on attendance. Actually, what it did do is had a positive impact on the relationship between children and parents by increasing their engagement, which is what we intended. And 5% higher parental engagement might not sound like a lot, but actually it's the equivalent of returning a year 5 or 6 parent to the level of engagement that they had when their child was in kindergarten. So we consider that a really positive outcome for our customers. So that's a very quick tour of BI and what it is and what it isn't. So I think it's important to remember that, as I said, BI isn't the be all and end all of policy making. In fact, it's just a complement to your traditional policy tools, and it's not a silver bullet. You can't solve every problem with individual nudges. BI is much more of a problem-solving method and an approach to understanding how best to get the results you want. So if you want to know how to start doing BI today, think customer behavior first, gather evidence on what people are naturally doing and thinking, and then evaluate the impact of the interventions that you're putting out. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Fred now.
Great. Thanks, Ash. I am, oh, sorry, I just retook over the slides and it went back to the start. So I will be taking you through the concept of sludge. Thanks, Ash. That was a great introduction. That was the first time I saw the use of desire lines used, and I think the metaphor definitely works. So what is sludge? I think it's a term, well, it's a concept that you're all familiar with, but it's just a term that we use in behavioural insights to describe the excessive or unjustified frictions that make it difficult for customers to get what they want and when they want it. But I guess rather than going through a definition, I think examples kind of make it very easy to understand. So we've all had the experience of just making one click and we've subscribed to a a year-long newsletter or something, but when we go to cancel it, the company or business makes it extra hard for us to kind of cancel it. Also getting a rebate, maybe not as common these days, but we get lured into buying something with the opportunity of getting a rebate, but then the business makes it super hard for you to get that money back. And then similarly with returning a product, we've all been through that experience of all the admin involved in returning a product. But I think the key point for that one as well is to recognize that it's not just about the returning product, but also worrying about whether it's going to get there and whether the company's actually going to give you the money back. So that's kind of what it encapsulates sludge. This if you want to share some of if you experience some sludge in your life, please share it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just keep going forward with the slides. But this one's just to kind of contextualize what sludge is. Ash talked you through a few nudges that our team has worked on in the past, with the letters and the working with Department of Education. But sludge, I guess, is the antithesis of that. It's the things that get in the way of a good customer experience, or frictions is another word you can use to describe sludge. But I guess what does it look like in New South Wales government? I think we can all appreciate some of these things particularly for customers when they're going through a process. In particular, if they're trying to find information to kind of understand what they have to do during a process, that's a really common form of sludge. The second one there, forms, that's I would call quintessential or very classic sludge. Complex questions, not knowing what detail to put in a form is often a very common form of sludge. Then excessive wait times. I know that Service New South Wales has done great work to kind of speed up processes and concierge people, but there's still experiences across government where people spending lots of time on the phone or just waiting for an outcome. And then finally, the last point, the complex decision points, is just a really important one to recognise, because it's not necessarily something that we'll see our customers do. They're making a decision about what license they want or what process they're going to go through, but we don't actually, if we don't give them the right information, that decision could be really difficult as part of their process. And that's just a picture of our Minister Dominello, and he's not a fan of sludge either, and neither are we. Just to kind of give you a bit of theory about sludge and how reflecting on some of those cognitive biases that Ash picked up on, why they combine with sludge to make such a bad customer experience. On the left, we've got we know that people often tend to overvalue the present moment, and they may procrastinate or avoid working towards future goals. And this can be exacerbated by even the smallest of frictions. So any kind of sludge, even if we think when we're designing a policy or trying to implement it, we think, oh, that's something easy for our customers to do, that could actually lead to some kind of procrastination, because we know that people often avoid doing things even if it's the smallest inconvenience. And then on the right hand side, we've got cognitive scarcity as well, another bias that Ash mentioned before. But we know that when people are faced with lots of long or complex information, it can be difficult to kind of understand it and navigate a process. And we know that more people are more prone to errors if they're under stress. And we also know there's also disproportional impact for certain groups. Customers who are busy, under financial stress, or experiencing illness can be really impacted by sludge. So when we're designing solutions or trying to implement policy, we need to think about how sludge can impact our customers and design solutions for all of them. Now, before I just go into giving an overview of our sludge method, I just wanted to make this final point about sludge. It's not necessarily about sometimes the process itself can be efficient, but there are certain things that can make a process more difficult or unsafe for our customers. And some of the points here include embarrassment. So customers may feel embarrassed about disclosing certain information during a process. They may feel excluded because they require certain resources like money or time, or even the language that we use in a process can be exclusionary. Similarly, if a process doesn't appear very transparent, they don't know what's going to happen, how we're going to assess an application, they may distrust government, or they may distrust the process, sorry. And then finally, I think, very obviously, certain processes can make our customers feel anxious because, they're not sure whether they can get through a process or not. So with that in mind, it's kind of a very broad overview of the concept of sludge. We've developed a sludge audit method. Sludge audit method. Basically, it's a very standardized process that we've created for people from across government. So policy officers, process owners, to give them a way to quantify the time, cost, and experience of interacting with New South Wales government. And basically, we've drawn from a range of disciplines, a lot of what Ash talked about earlier, to kind of create a standard or best practice for people to kind of rate their processes against and kind of identify opportunities to improve the process. And the way we do that is we, drawing from those disciplines, we kind of want to measure customer experience across those kind of 5 areas, but thinking about how do people actually behave during a process, we want to collect data and understand that, how satisfied they are, how long they spend on the process, and and converting that to a cost, and also the effort involved. And then the final point I'd like to make about the method is it's not necessarily about I'd like to make the point that it's really about quickly identifying, prioritizing opportunities to reduce sludge. That's kind of its primary purpose, but it can also be used as kind of like a business case tool to kind of, identify, the time and cost involved in a process for a customer and government, and can be used as kind of a way to support a business case as well. This next slide, there's a bit of detail on it, but the only point I wanted to make is that we know that making things easier can improve customers' trust in a process, and with that improve customers' trust with government as well. So, we've created a tool to help the New South Wales government strategy to become the world's most customer-centric government, and the way we do that is identifying cutting unnecessary effort. I think I've got a few more minutes, but just this is an overview of the method, but without going into any detail, it's a 5-step sludge audit process, which allows you to identify sludge, quantify and analyze it, implement behavioural solutions, and it also provides a baseline for you to be able to measure the impact of service improvement. Just going into a bit of detail with steps 3 and 4, that's really where you are measuring and trying to kind of understand the customer experience. So on the left-hand side, step 3 is the time and cost audit. It's all about kind of measuring customer time and also measuring government time involved in the process and converting those to costs. So we can determine where a particular friction is wasting current customer time or requires government to spend time and fix a particular or recurrent problem in the process. And then in step 4, we've got the customer experience audit. So that's really where we're kind of collating a lot of that best practice and kind of creating a standard for people to assess, what a good customer service experience looks like. And a really basic example, just to kind of make the point without going into too much detail here, is, say you've got a website in your process and your customers have to go there to kind of understand what they have to do in the process. We've created these scales to basically say how does the design, the language, and the content on that website, how does that stack up? Is it easy for customers to kind of find information and understand it so they can go through a process as easy as possible? So that's kind of an overview of that. Just with my final minute here, just wanted to kind of bring your attention to a case study. There's a bit of detail on this page, but this was one of the first sludge audits we did for home building licenses, so basically tradie licenses. And the point here was that we identified a range of different friction points in the process. And one of those was the fact that customers were finding it really difficult to understand the letters we sent out to them. So they were, a lot of people were making mistakes on their forms, but, they were sending out these letters. People were calling up, trying to find out what information they needed to provide. And with a simple change to some of those letters, we dropped the amount of phone calls by 32%. So, that's less government time, that's less customer time. And the tool enables you to kind of measure and quantify that impact as well. And yeah, we've been able to take this process or the method to across government. And this year we hosted our second Sludgeathon event. So all those teams here from across government, you can see there. We basically ran them through the sludge. They all did their own sludge audit for about 5 or 6 weeks. They identified where their problems were, and then they attended a 2-day event where we brought them all together. They learned a bunch of skills, and they were able to kind of develop their own solutions to those problems. I won't bore you with the detail there, but there's some great feedback, and we had some great results as well. So I'll just pass off to Gareth. His final section.
Great, thank you for that, Fred. Hope you all found that interesting. I'm just going to talk you through some resources on behavioural insights that you can access. So you can actually start applying behavioural insights today. There's a number of resources to help you get started. BETA, who are the federal government's behavioural insight team, has a really great online course, really engaging and interactive. It's designed for public servants. It incorporates behavioural insights in the way they teach it. So would definitely recommend that. You can also visit our website where you can access our newsletter, where you'll receive tips on behavioural insights, news on our latest work, and invitations to our events. You can also find our blog, case studies, and guides, anything from how to increase take-up of programs or services to how to actually test whether your behaviour change intervention works. We also run half-an-hour clinics for anyone in the New South Wales Public Service who wants tailored advice on resolving a behavioural challenge that they may have. If Fred's presentation on sludge resonated with you, or you recognised a sludgy process in your own policy area, we've got a bunch of support there too. We do have a SharePoint site. We can access checklists, templates and guides, anything from reducing sludge on forms, websites, letters and emails, and apps. We do also hold clinics with our sludge support team, and they'll give you some advice on running your own sludge audit. Something we've recently developed is the sludge audit tool, and that's a really comprehensive tool enabling you to run your own end-to-end sludge audit. Sort of captures all the metrics and steps you need to do it comprehensively. So keep an eye out for that. If you'd like to take a more hands-on approach, we do run an 8-month bootcamp where we help your team work through real-world challenges in your team and gives you the opportunity to actually build applied expertise in behavioural insights, and you'll learn how to run a successful behaviour change project. So that's just an overview of all our resources, and I'll hand it back to Dave to have the final word.
Wow, thank you. That is pretty amazing, comprehensive 30 minutes of power, passion, and good customer impact. There's a lot to absorb there. Well done, guys. And we know there's a lot of questions in the chat, which we're going to scroll through now and answer and support. And Louisa's going to also provide an opportunity for people to ask questions of us. I just wanted to recap the aim of what we were doing in that 30 minutes. One was to give you a perspective around what is behavioural insights and how does it help you as a policy professional. So Ash talked through the fundamentals of behavioural insights and how it can add to the toolkit that you're building as a policy professional in the New South Wales government. We wanted to share with you how you can use behavioural insights to improve customer experience, reduce customer effort, reduce friction, and improve take-up of your services for the diverse customers that you have, or clients, patients across New South Wales. And Fred introduced you to the amazing sludge audit tool and method, and we're putting in the chat and also in this presentation, which will circulate to you, some of the tools, techniques, tips and guides for working on sludge. And then Gareth brought us home with some of the resources and supports that are available for you as an individual, so to go out and build your own capability so that you can bring that to the team. And then also, as I shared with you before, we're really committed to a behaviour smart New South Wales government. So we try to work with teams and divisions and branches in clusters to support capability uplift and look at things at a systemic level. So that's our 30 minutes of a whole lot of fun with this amazing community of practice, and we're going to start answering some of the questions in the chat. And also, Louisa, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to kick us off, and then I'll let other people know when to come on and ask your question. So if I've asked you to come on and ask a question, please turn your camera on and introduce yourself as well. So my question is, and I haven't written this one down, but I hope you can cope. You've talked a lot about the delivery of services and government's role in terms of regulation in the examples from behavioural insights. But what about policy design? How can we use behavioural insights in policy design as well?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Louisa. And if you remember back, I'm sure a lot of you have seen things like the Bridgman and Davis, the policy cycle, and those sort of reified versions of how policy happens. Our perspective is that behavioural insights or behaviour is relevant to any part of what might be a policy cycle. So from inception to delivery, from framing a problem and understanding a problem, you can think through applying behavioural insights using behavioural evidence right through to implementation. And I kind of always see it as an always cyclical and circular process. There's not one point in time. The reason why we emphasize services is because we really want to be constructive and helpful as a delivery unit rather than a research kind of unit. So while research, evaluation and testing is really important to the application of any policy or the application of behavioural insights, we really need to put the customer first and the impact first and think through what are we trying to achieve, how are we trying to help people, and that's how we see policy. And so, yeah, look, it's really you can use behavioural insights at any part of the sort of policy cycle that you might be engaging with, and you can see that in terms of just how a policy problem is framed, or how we think about what we're trying to achieve with like the policy objective you may have.
Thanks, that's great. Definitely we can apply that. Now, I think it's Karthik. Would you like to come on and ask your question?
Thanks for that. Sorry, my camera seems to be misbehaving.
That's fine.
Just curious, when the team emphasized that they are looking at natural ongoing behaviors and trying to bring that out and put on a path so that there is reduced friction and things like that, how are we accounting for stereotypes and ensuring that those are not the ones that are highlighted and those are not, perpetuated, so to say? Thanks.
Yeah, great. Also great question. I'm happy for the team to come in, Ash, in terms of the very clear message that we have is don't assume, always test, always evaluate, think through, backfire. Stereotypes really take us also to assumptions you make about how people respond to context as well. And again, it's critically important and for good government to really think through who the sort of customer, we call them in customer service, who the customer is, what they want, what they need in a circumstance, and how best to leverage and support that. Ash, did you want to add anything in terms of the experience you've had in running interventions?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think the example that I showed with the letter to parents trying to empower them with more information about their child's absences actually had a huge risk of backfiring because it scared them. And that's that relates to a cognitive bias called naive realism, which is that we all kind of walk around thinking that everyone sees the world the way that we do. And we know when we practice behavioural insights that just isn't true. So one of the ways that we do this is to constantly check our assumptions. So we try to gather evidence to prove to ourselves or disprove that the things we assume are true or not true. So if you're really convinced that you know that something is true, like parents just need more information about their child's absences, you need to sort of go out and get evidence. Well, is that true? And then the other thing that we do is test everything. So before rolling something out across all of New South Wales, we'll just show it to some parents and say, hey, how would you feel if you got this letter? Or we'll do a small pilot and then collect people's experiences of receiving that letter and how it changed their behaviour. So cornerstones are just asking customers what their experience of using something is like, and test and iterate, test and iterate, test and iterate.
Thank you. We're going to stay on similar topics for the next few questions about how we consider the different needs of our community and our audience and our customers. Sophie, would you like to come on and ask your question?
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Sophie. I work in Department of Planning and Environment on housing supply, joining from Darkinjung country this morning, which is the central coast of New South Wales. So yeah, my question, as I wrote in the chat, just how do we make sure BI approaches are inclusive of neurodivergent people, so those with autism spectrum disorders or ADHD and that kind of thing?
Yeah, really, really great question. And I mean, look, the general answer is, as we said before, about when we're in a specific context and working with in the community, is thinking through what's the objective that customers may have and you also may have as the sort of policy owner or the service deliverer. There is some really interesting research around, we talked before, Ash talked about heuristics, so the mental shortcuts that people take, and there's a great set of debate about how they are different in both different cultural and neurological contexts. And again, that same response, which isn't a cop-out one, it's a real one of you've really got to test the application of the models you're taking forward, is absolutely what we live and breathe in our work. And I would emphasize that's critically important. There was another question in the chat that I saw, which I just wanted to pick up as well, that's worth referencing, about plain English and so on. And we've worked with the Plain English Foundation in developing up a lot of the guides and supports that we have prepared in thinking about sludge, because there are the assumptions that are often inadvertently made in government about the degree of literacy or the type of connection that people are able to have with government services. Someone mentioned as well people's experience of anxiety in connecting with government services, or you know, there might be cultural reasons why government hasn't always been been supportive of a community, or where there might be the experience of trauma, and that impacts on how people connect with government services. Again, the part of the purpose of the sludge process is to really think through the distributional impacts, what we call the distributional impacts of sludge, but likewise in any intervention, to really think through what's the path or way, the context in which someone is interacting in a service. So the old model of a very rational, very considered and structured engagement with government services, we know that in the real world, that's not how people make decisions, and we need to be cognizant and adapt our services to do that.
And we have one.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add one more point, because we've talked a lot about impact here today, which is, you know, a huge cornerstone of what we do in BI. But impact isn't always straightforward. So we will, at the beginning of a project, we'll sort of debate, are we trying to have a really broad impact for the general population? Or are we looking at who is disproportionately disadvantaged by the way a service is set up, and can we make a really big impact for a smaller subset of people, maybe like neurodivergent people? So again, that's all part of the evidence gathering phase, is where is the best place for us to make impact.
Thank you. And we have one more question about customer focus. So I think Lucy would like to come on and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, team. This is Lucy from the Office of the Advocate for Children and Young People. As you said, a similar question. I was wondering if you found any difference in the cognitive, like the underlying cognitive bias when it comes to young people. So we know that behaviours are sometimes different, perceptions are sometimes different. Have you noticed any difference in terms of how the cognitive biases work?
Whoa. Who can I throw that to? That's a great one.
I can start from the neuroscience perspective if you like. Yeah. So we do know things like, so adults have problems with self-regulation, but you'd say young people have more problems with self-regulation. So the part of your brain, the frontal lobe, that sort of allows you to think about long-term outcomes and long-term benefits and regulate your behavior, to do healthy things now to get the benefit later. That's really only finished developing at about age of 25. So things like that are sort of worse in young people. But again, if we're looking at designing an intervention for young people, we'll talk to young people. So I think that we all just assume we're far too old to understand what will resonate with young people now. So we have to just talk to them and really co-design interventions with populations like that.
Okay, we're going to shift our focus now back on, I guess, to interactions within government. So, Clara, would you like to come on and ask your question?
Sure. Thanks, Louisa. My question was about how receptive are government agencies to adopt the behavioral insights that you come up with in your research, and if there are any change management processes involved in applying those findings.
That's another great question. Look, first and foremost, we try our very hardest to only do things with you. So our perspective and our orientation is always to come to our partners in government and say, how can we help? We never are in a scenario where we think of great ideas in a back office and then say, hey, Louisa, you should do this. We always try to avoid that kind of scenario. We take a very a mindset of humility in terms of the expertise that is within like this group and the people who are thinking policy questions and delivering services. So that orientation is, for us, is really important. And one of the reasons why that's really important is because we can help you a policy area or understand a scenario with using evidence and testing things. But really what we're about is having impact, right? Making a difference, creating change, and you will be part of and lead that change journey. So it's not helpful for someone else from outside to come in and just say, hey, you should do this. So for us, implementation, what's sometimes called scale, is always our first consideration. Is how is this going to work in practice? How do we think about implementation, different cohorts, and so on? So I just really want to emphasize that as part of the orientation that we have. It's also why we're not able to help lots of individuals in terms of their skill and capability. It's why we often take a collective approach. So thinking about resources available for you to use, like the sludge tool and the guides, but also the blog that we publish and so on, so that you can also use your own capability and enhance it. We don't own behavioural insights, knowledge and expertise in the New South Wales government. There's a lot of great expertise around in the New South Wales government to connect with and develop that you can be applying as well.
I feel like you're using your behavioural insights on us, but you've got to walk the talk. So well done. Now, Claire has a question which I'm sure a lot of people have been thinking about. Claire, would you like to come on and ask a question?
Yeah, I actually put a few in chat. Was there, which one did you have your eye on?
The one about regulatory, the need to, I guess, in terms of implementation of regulations and that type of thing. Yeah.
So I guess I was just interested in any tips you may have for policy teams who need to provide legally accurate information to regulated sectors, and wanting to balance, wanting simple and engaging language versus the need to use accurate descriptions of requirements that may have unavoidably clunky definitions in legislation. I work for New South Wales Health on tobacco issues, and one example is basically you're not allowed to smoke inside in a public place, but it's not actually inside, it's an enclosed public place, and the whole definition around it is clunky. And how do you deal with things that are complex and need to be accurate so they're not misleading, but at the same time you want to make it easy for the people who need to comply. So any reflections, I guess, or tips?
Yeah, that's a great question. Fred, did you want to talk about your experience in supporting regulators?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, thanks, Dave. It's a great question, Claire. It's something that we constantly, we've got a lot of experience in. But I think the example from home builders was, and the first piece of advice we always give is try it out with the legal team. We always get surprised by how willing they are to, you know, go with like the plain English explanation and things. But there are lots of little like getting into the like detail. I guess there are lots of different ways you can think about simplifying language with like examples, and also using some tools, which there are like some online tools. I think we got sent, or we've been looking at one recently. It's called Explain Jargon, and you can basically put any language or jargon into it, and it translates it into plain English. I think that's a paid resource. But in terms of, you know, tools that are free and available, you know, you've got Word. You can use something called the Flesch-Kincaid score. So there's lots of different, you know, there's, you know, at the high level, the strategy level, you know, talking to the legal team, and then there's lots of tools available. And then also in our sludge guides as well, there's also tips in terms of how to make language easier to understand and simplify it as well. Unfortunately, we haven't. There's definitely there's one on letters, but we haven't. Well, I think the point is we don't really care. We don't care how complex the legislative language is. It's all about you know, reinterpreting it. So there is lots of that in the sludge guides as well, for the more like detail and technical level.
Often there's very good that there's that rationale as well for why is the legislation complex, and really thinking through that. I mean, there is a whole movement obviously about plain English legislation, and that's interesting in and of it itself. But I think it's that adopt that customer mindset is probably a really good starting point, right? What the purpose of the regulation is to influence behaviour, be it of a business, a consumer, or a medical practitioner, and really thinking through what are the tools of regulation that you've got and how behavioural insights can help you with that.
Thank you.
I think there was a question earlier, or perhaps it was a comment, but I'm going to ask it because I can't find it again. Is there a role for behavioural insights to create sludge where we want to disincentivize a behaviour? Yeah,
Fred, do you want to? That's a beautiful question, actually.
Sorry, I was just looking at one of the questions. Can I get the question again? Because I was just looking at.
Yep. Is there a role for using behavioural insights to create sludge where we want to disincentivize a behaviour?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think there's lots of examples. It's like one of those like very academic things about definitions. We have friction. Sludge is basically frictions that are bad, so that make, you know, lead to bad customer outcomes, but there's frictions that can lead to good customer outcomes. I think a very basic example is when we go to delete stuff off our computer, it stops us and tries to, you know, ask us whether we really want to do that. And yeah, so there's lots of frictions, and particularly I think in a more applicable context, making it more applicable, sorry, is thinking about when we need customers to make a big decision. You know, we want to make sure we slow them down and make sure they're informed. So we want to create some frictions in that process to make sure they make an informed decision. Yeah. Sorry.
And that's fantastic. And one of the reasons why we developed that sludge audit tool is so that policy and program people can have a conversation informed by data about where friction or sludge might be helpful or doesn't serve their purpose. So by doing an audit, what you get is a sense of where the time and effort is being spent and its consequence. And so then you're able to have a data-informed conversation about, is this really is this meeting our needs, this slowdown here, or is this getting in the way of customer needs? And so you can have that design kind of question. And then the other great thing, of course, is you do it once, you make some changes, and then you do it again, and you see what impact that's had. So it's got that built-in evaluation, which again, as Ash was saying before, is the sort of one of the common kind of golden threads across good, innovative public service practice is use your evidence, use your data, evaluate, and iterate.
And I'm hoping that Claire is still around because she asked another really good question earlier. Claire, would you like to come on and ask your question about, yeah, there you are, IT and digital communication, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just something. Basically, I guess it was about, it strikes me, you know, being more from the policy side, so we might have, you know, some online ordering process or registration process or whatever, and we might want to make it more simple, and have an idea of what the needs might be, but we can't actually do that ourselves because there's back end behind it that we don't necessarily understand. And so do you have any tips, I guess, for policy teams working with the people who have that back end technical knowledge, I guess either in our own agencies or even, you know, down the track, it might even be good if there's some kind of tools or list of things that could get included in specs for if you were procuring a service. So I guess it's even like knowing what to ask for, kind of like a 101 about what exists for like the non-techie amongst us, and then how do you go about sort of seeking that from your back end people, if that makes sense, because we kind of speak, I guess, different languages at times.
Yeah, look, I immediately thought there's a wonderful digital project tool actually available in from DCS. I'll dig around and see if I can draw it up and put it in the chat for you, because it's a really helpful structured digital project management tool. Yeah, and sorry, and then why don't I go do that, and then I'm gonna Fred or Ash or Gareth, any connecting point there in terms of resources and supports for the online world? It is going to be, it depends what the problem is, I guess, Claire. That's what I'd probably say.
We do have a sludge guide around reducing sludge on websites, but I feel like you might be asking more about sort of the back end development side of it. Is that right? Oh, you're on mute, Claire.
You'd think I'd know about that by this long in. One example, I've got a lot of examples in mind, but one, for example, is we provide free signage to tobacco retailers and so forth. And at the moment, the process is there's like an order form in a Word document that has to get typed. You know, it's not efficient, and you know, for us or for them. And I guess a point of friction for us is, oh, how do we go about actually making that change? And everything to do with IT seems complex and expensive, and you know what I mean? So I just guess any way to bridge that gap to make it feel more doable, I guess, for a policy team to see, oh, this way of interacting with our customers isn't great.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, completely. And I think this goes to a point that's been made in the chat. Someone asked, at what point do you involve BI? And basically the answer is as early as possible. And like if we could go back in time and say we actually want to design a whole digital system that makes it not only easy for the customer but also easy for us, that would be great. And that is a question of, do you want to sort of invest in overhauling a system to get better outcomes for both government and customer? That's really hard. There are sort of interim steps that you can do. So you can start exploring, is it better to collect information via a Microsoft form instead of a Word document? So what tools exist to just take one step in the right direction to sort of get automatic data collection instead of someone having to take that extra step of pulling it out of a Word document? You know, so you can constrain responses. So if you're looking for a number, people can only give you a number, things like that. But yeah, I would say the best application of BI is creating kind of a whole system around it, so you can benefit and the customer can benefit as well, but often that's really hard.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one very quick question, which might serve as a wrap up for you as well. I think Nandina, would you like to come on?
Thank you. Just a question around, do you see any kind of limitations for behavioral science in effective design of policy or in the policy space in general?
Oh, yeah. Gosh, we are so fallible and there's so much to learn in every context. And I do think it's really important to think about sort of I was going to say horses for courses, I guess, like what you're trying to achieve and whether there's a behavioural dimension to it or not. Also, whether there's like even just resourcing and time and those kinds of things. So we come at it from a really humble perspective and thinking through where is value best added in a given context. And I think just overall to wrap it, we will circulate these slides and the contact information will be in the slides. We also really encourage you to take a self-directed learning approach and then to really engage in the material and so on and build your individual capability, but then also to think about connecting with the unit either through the, if you've got a really significant problem, through the clinic or through the Sludge SharePoint tools, and think about how it might add value to your team, your unit, your branch, where you sit. So a really great questions from everyone. So interesting. And please don't forget to fill in the survey that Oscar's
Thank you. And on behalf of the community of policy professionals, I'd like to thank Dave, Ash, Fred and Gareth for taking the time to speak with us today. And sharing their amazing insights and also tools and products. So that's fantastic. I'd like to thank Oscar for his behind the scenes organisation and you, our audience, for your interest and enthusiasm in policy. We'll be back in September, so look out for our next webinars throughout the remainder of 2022. Until then, take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.